Anyway, I know everyone's had a long week working hard, kind of like this guy. Can we take a minute to appreciate the staging in this picture? Nothing on the desk. At some point they said, you know what? Let's put the white hat on him, get him to really look in the camera, and make an important phone call. And these pictures always remind me of the king from the Robin Hood Disney movies. This guy. This really irritated, pissed off, rich, old baby. Anyway, good morning. Thanks so much for coming out to Creative Mornings. I know it's a big deal to get downtown. I just saw Ara, who I work with here, who hasn't crossed the 134 in like 2 years. So thanks for making it down. Thanks to all the sponsors and the volunteers and Cross Campus for hosting. And specifically, thank you to Lindsay, who has been running Creative Mornings here for a year. She's done just an amazing job. It's a lot of work to put these on. Yeah, seriously. I said this like last year when I stopped hosting, and by the way, hosting is better than speaking, I've decided, that she was the only person I would have passed this chapter to, and she's fantastic, and thank you for the whiskey. I downed it right before I got up here. So, yeah, this is kind of a big deal for me. I've got to speak at a lot of conferences around the world, and this is kind of the best moment yet, being here. So, thank you. John Cleese from Monty Python said, nothing will stop you being creative so effectively as the fear of making a mistake. And creative people who make their living being creative, sort of struggle with these highs of self-confidence and lows of kind of just brutal self-doubt. The whole notion of what we do is so subjective, at least on the visual side, and it can lead to a lot of anxiety. And I was just saying to Brian, who's been coming to Creative Mornings for a long time, that sometimes when Creative Mornings host passes off a chapter, they speak at the next event. Lindsay had offered this to me last year, but I can't remember what the theme was, but I didn't really know anything about it. Anxiety is something I know a lot about, for better or worse. I think, when I think about that, I go back like 30 years to the night of my bar mitzvah. And I had done all the hard stuff, and we were having a party in my parents' backyard. We had a DJ there called the Music Machine. And it was 1998, so he was playing some Depeche Mode and all the other stuff I was into, and I actually still am. But, and something happened. I started like having trouble breathing. I had chest pains, and I don't really know what it was. And my dad took me to the emergency room, and that's where I spent that party, which is basically, you know, why I'm not a party person. But this is something that, you know, so that was 30 years ago, and there's been other episodes like that, and this is something that I've dealt with, and I know a lot of other people have dealt with for a long time. And over the years, I've learned how to deal with this, and sometimes it feels like the world is closing in on you, and you are barreling towards failure and humiliation. You know, it's not just irritability, oversensitivity, biting nails, whatever it may be. I just want to say I'm obviously not a doctor or a therapist or a counselor or anything like that. So, you know, this is just my story, and this is how I deal with stuff. So take it with a grain of salt. But maybe there's something more relatable in here. And but today, because it's Creative Mornings, I'm going to focus on specifically how anxiety has affected the work I've had to do as a designer, a creative director, a manager of people, and I think that there's some very relatable content here. So I'm going to talk about anxiety about the work we do, anxiety about where we work, and anxiety in our world. And these are there are choices that we make in life that can influence so much about how we feel. It's where we work, it's who we work with, and it's obviously what's going on in the world around us. And as I've learned over the years, combating anxiety is all about being proactive. Anxious people live in the future. And this was a statement that here's where it gets weird, a hypnotherapist told me in New York. I'd gone to see someone when I was going through a lot of stuff. It was the first time I'd ever gone to talk to anyone like that, and he was amazing. And he gave me a lot of perspective. And this is so true. Anxious people do live in the future, and you have to live in the moment. Anxious people worry about what's happening in hours, weeks down the road. For example, let's say you're doing a CreativeMornings talk, and you wake up at 3:41 in the morning, and you start thinking that, hey, maybe the mic's not going to work, and people aren't going to show up, and you're going to get lost on the way there. And when you stop and you focus on the moment, you realize that the best thing you can do to have a successful talk is to turn over and go back to sleep. And it's hard to get to that place, and it doesn't seem like it would be. And a couple other things this guy said to me was, hear the voice in your head. You have to respond to it, but don't react to it. And it's about focus. It's about really living in the moment, which sounds super cliche, but it really is. As you find yourself worrying days down the road, you need to dial it back. And you need to trust the people around you and also trust yourself and talk yourself off that ledge. And if you have people you can confide in, you need to confide in them. And it's important to get this stuff off your chest. Trust is just such an important thing. And anxiety and creativity definitely go hand in hand. They kind of motivate one another. And I think the idea of focus and trust are key to persevering. And so when we think about the work that we do as creative people, a lot of what we have to do is come up with ideas. And we have to come up with something new, something different, something brilliant. And we have to take chances, and we have to put ourselves out there. And coming up with the idea can be one of the most difficult things. And if you've ever had to pitch in front of a large room, there's that moment where you can imagine yourself bombing terribly. And so you have to really own the idea. And so today I'm going to tell you how to produce ideas. And I know that sounds silly, but I'm going to tell you about a book called A Technique for Producing Ideas. And now you really have to go on this journey with me for a minute. This book, which actually started as a paper, was written in 1965 by a guy called James Webb Young. If you can buy it on Amazon for $2. There's tons of spelling errors. You'll read it in 30 minutes. It's short. And I can't remember when I read this for the first time. I read it last week before this talk, and I read it before I took my last job. And it didn't really teach me anything. But what it did do is it validated a process that I felt I've been using either consciously or subconsciously for a while. Has anyone read this book? One person. All right. So, thank you. And the author acknowledges how simple this process is, and that anyone can do it, and it's in all of us. And and as I go through these steps, you're probably like, yeah, I do all that stuff. And I also think that everything else I talk about in this talk will link back to these techniques. It's about logic, it's about caring, it's about smart choices, and it's about trust. However, again, this is my opinion. About 38% of people on Amazon would not agree. Here's a couple of my favorite reviews. I found no real insider wisdom in this slim volume of poorly spelled, grammatically incorrect, carelessly thrown together assemblage of crusty, stale advice. Almost worth reading. So, if you think this is all bullshit, then, you're in that camp, and that's totally fine. So step one is gathering materials and doing research, and you need to care. We have to passionately care about the work that we're doing. Don't take a job if you don't care about the project. You'll be doing yourself a disservice, you'll be doing your company a disservice, your client, your boss, whoever it is. And the first step to producing a great idea is research. Gathering materials that are both general and specific. Get to know your subject matter intimately. Talk to people, talk to customers, talk to people having bad experiences. If you have customer support in your organization, become really good friends with them. They have all the answers. Step two is dive into your findings and doing analysis. And you have to understand, what are the problems? What are the patterns? What are the relationships? And you'll start to have little light bulbs go off. And you're going to feel overwhelmed, and that's okay, because you should feel overwhelmed. There should be so much of it. You have to understand how to relate to your audience, what are their struggles, what are their successes, and if you can't relate or you don't care, it's not the right project for you. Number three, and here's where it gets kind of hokey, is incubate and walk away. The idea of subconscious thought. You need to be patient. If you're sitting in a war room covered in Post-its and pictures and things like that, get up and walk out. If you live in LA, we're so blessed with all these wonderful trails around us, just go walk, get lost in nature. I know it sounds crazy, but it works. Listen to music, go to a museum, take the metro from one side of LA to the other. The idea will come to you when you are least expecting it. And all the stuff that you've been processing will be in your head, and you'll be able to think clearly. Step 4 is, Eureka, you've got the idea, you formalize it, and you prepare to present it. And you have to trust yourself. And in the book he says, the idea will come, it will come when you're least expecting it, often when you're half awake. And you know when you have that good idea. You know what that feels like. For some reason, these things seem to come to me in the shower. And I'm not sure why, but you have to trust that you've done the work. And the final step is to relinquish control, trust and collaborate. And this is the most important part. You need to trust the people that you work with. And I definitely subscribe to the managerial sort of theory that you should be hiring people who are better at their jobs than you would be. And when I look out here and I see all these people that I work with today and that I used to work with, they're all so much better at what they do than I would do. So you need to give them that idea, and you need to let them run with it, and you need to relinquish control. And so that's how you produce an idea, and it works. And when we think about the anxiety tips from earlier, they work well in this formula, because it is about focus. It's about really throwing yourself into it and being in that moment, and it's about trust. It's about trusting yourself, trusting the process, and trusting the people that you work with. And you really have to care about the work. You have to ask yourself often, why am I here? Why am I working on this? Because more so than possibly any time in history, companies want designers, and they want creative people. They want creative thinking. We have a lot of options. And so where are we going to work? And what are the problems that we're going to solve? The incredible Paul Rand said, create solutions to design problems that are meaningful and memorable. Where we work dictates the kind of problems that we're going to solve. So there's that question of what do you want to do? And I want to say that the advice that I hate hearing the most at creative conferences is just quit your job and do what you love. And I know that sounds great, but it seems to come from such an incredible place of privilege. I think it's kind of dangerous. And what I like to say is, think about quitting your job and do what you love at night until you're able to pay the bills doing that, or something. But this question of what do you want to do, we've been asked our whole lives. I just asked my 6-year-old a couple weeks ago what he wanted to do, and he said, President of America. And I said, that's great. Obviously interested in his foreign policy, but frankly, it can't be much worse than what's going on now. So I always loved making zines. When I moved to New York, I made rock posters for a long time. Hundreds and hundreds of rock posters. And it's the most fun work I've ever done. It's the medium that I like the best, and it pays nothing. So while I'm making rock posters, my landlord was not particularly interested in the Mogwai poster I made. So then the conversation switches to, you have to do what you need to do to get by. And, I'm not going to tell you how I took a Craigslist job moving furniture in Queens for a week and was maybe the worst mover ever. But I managed to reconnect with a college radio friend who was working at a record label, and she hired me to do a bunch of their stuff. So I started doing a bunch of label work, and it's what I call pay the bills work and not portfolio work. Like, here's a flash e-card I made for Babyface. For the Preserving the Sexy single. And I did tons of this work that didn't end up in my portfolio. I did a bunch of stuff for Rod Stewart, got to see him at the Apollo, that was kind of awesome. But the thing is, I cared about the work, and I worked my ass off. And I was known as a good resource. And sometimes that pendulum swings back around, and you get paid to do the stuff you really want to do. Like, somehow, I got to redesign the website for Columbia Records, and growing up loving jazz, this was a dream come true. And then it even got more awesome because I worked my ass off. And I got to do this incredible dream project that I never thought I would ever get to do, which was spend the better part of a year in the studio with Alicia Keys when she was making her second record. This is a crappy picture I took of her at the Hit Factory, like 2, 3 in the morning, one night after we had just watched an orchestra perform a bunch of stuff she wrote. And she was so young and just so talented. And every time I went in there, I was so damn happy and lucky and just, I couldn't believe my luck. I never thought I would end up in a place like this. And what an amazingly cool, generous, talented person. And I still love making posters. For the last 5 or 6 years, I've done all the posters for the UCLA Department of Art, and it pretty much pays what it did when I made posters in New York. So I still have to have, a real job. And so there's that question of, what do you really want to do? And I think that is more about, like, where do we want to work? And this is something that obviously designers, creative people worry a lot about. And I used to do a lot of portfolio reviews. I used to speak at a lot of conferences. I'd meet a lot of young designers, and I would ask them, what do you want to do? And they say, I want to work at Facebook. I want to work at Google. I want to work at a startup. And I would say, that's cool, why? Oh, because it's Facebook. And I get it. Like, when I was leaving my last job, I wanted to work at Facebook. I wanted to work at a startup. I had a bunch of interviews. And I realized I didn't really want to do that. And, I'm not a Facebook user. I haven't been for a long time. I haven't missed it, to be honest. But I think it's important to think about not where we want to work, but why we want to work there. And I think a lot of designers struggle with this idea of going to work somewhere where someone hasn't heard of that company. How are they ever going to get ahead? And it makes me think of this interaction I had a few years ago. I was running a branding workshop, like an all-day branding workshop at a conference, and there were about 40 or 50 people in there, and there were 2 people that really stood out. All of their answers were amazing. Their exercise work was incredible. And I went to ask them, I'm like, what do you guys do? They're like, we work somewhere super lame. Our job is so boring. Like, the project, it kind of sucks. And I said, well, what do you do? And they told me they worked at like this power water company somewhere in the Midwest. And they were taking a website that had lots of cool photos and fonts and all that stuff on there, and they were getting rid of all of it. And they were stripping this thing down to kind of be like a better designed Craigslist. Or like, if you've seen the gov.co.uk site. And the whole point of this was to make this site usable on poor internet connections and kind of crappy mobile devices, so the people in this community could pay their bills more easily. And I was like, that is a fucking amazing job. That's actually something that matters. You're doing something that is more helpful than 90% of tech companies out there. And I saw this tweet the other day that is amazing. Constantly amazed by Silicon Valley's obsession with the tiniest lifestyle problems when there are such gigantic challenges that we desperately need technical minds to address. And I think it's really important that we change our perspective about what work is and where we work. And we put a lot of emphasis on these tech behemoths that are doing amazing things. But you have to think about maybe the kind of impact you would have in these kinds of places. And there are tons of gems out there. And take this from someone who now works as a creative director at a company that essentially makes PDF software used in design and construction. I never thought I would end up in the studio with Alicia Keys, and I never thought I would end up here. This is on the 25th floor of the forthcoming Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Hospital in New York. I'm standing way far back from that railing. And this is Julio, and he works for a company called Turner, and they're building this massive cancer hospital, and they're using the software that the company that I work at now, Bluebeam, makes. And I got to spend a few hours with this guy walking around, and it was, I will tell you, one of the most meaningful days of work I've ever had. To hear how this thing that's being created here in Pasadena is influencing their lives. It's getting rid of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of sheets of useless paper. And it's allowing people on these job sites to finish their work hours early so they can get home and see their kids and go to soccer games and stuff like that. It was amazing. And I never thought I would end up in a place like this. I never thought I would work at a company like this after working on big brands for a long time and, quote unquote, sexy projects. This is the best experience I've ever had working anywhere. Because at the end of the day, design is really about solving problems. And it's about solving the right problems. And I think we need to search out the right problems, and we need to figure out how to fix them instead of creating fixes for bullshit problems. You guys probably remember this bodega thing that blew up the internet a while ago. These guys were going to put like a mini bar in an apartment to disrupt bodegas. And if you've ever lived anywhere with a bodega, you'll understand what a vital part of a community that is. I used to get my UPS packages dropped off there. And people freaked out. This is ridiculous. How are they doing this? This bodega bot even popped up. which every hour rattles something off like, these two ex-Apple engineers want to replace souvlaki shops with mobile collaboration. And you think we peaked, and then here comes the Robomart, a self-driving vegetable bin. And, you know, I really don't think we need any more vehicles on the road. This seems silly, but I mean, the hard thing is that on the other end of these projects and these companies are people that have invested time and money and effort into these things for years. And so it's hard to really hate on it that much, but at the same time, I think we as designers and people putting stuff out there have to be responsible for what we're creating. I recently saw this incredible retrospective of the artist, Mark Dion. This cabinet is filled with garbage that he found all over the Pacific coast. What you can't see is on that little ledge there are about 150 bottle caps arranged in rainbow order. And he said, never has there been a global culture which made so much and cared so little for it. And it's not just physical products, it's messaging, it's digital. I took this picture about a year ago in London. This is a Belsize Park tube stop. And I walked in there and I was like, wow, this is weird. There's nothing in here. It feels really strange. And then a few months later, I saw this guy post this. The sheer joy of not being advertised to for a minute. And that's what it was. It was being somewhere and not having messaging and pictures and all this stuff just shoved down our throats. And being someone who works in marketing, being someone who's worked in advertising for a long time, I think we have to be conscious of this. On the digital side, we are really disrupting decent user experiences for the sake of newsletter pop-ups. If you tried to read a news site on a mobile phone recently, it's a fucking nightmare. This is some stuff from Instagram. I really like Instagram. I'm pretty close to not using it, I have to say, because I'm finding that the advertising is so invasive and like creepily personal. We've been looking for some new furniture. I was on the article site, my bad, and then I got some retargeting there. I landed in Chicago last week, opened my phone up. Here's the Chicago coffee place. I was texting with people from work about being sick, and here's this Dayquil thing. And it sucks, and I think we sit in meetings and we talk about marketing tools and we talk about marketing advancements and, oh, we can track who's come to this site and we can send them this thing. And I think users know, and users hate this. So I think we have to find that balance. And are we all doing this? Are we all reporting these as sexually inappropriate? It really doesn't matter what it is, it's sexually inappropriate. But here's where I'm really going to depress you, because it's going to get a lot worse. And, you know, tech is this thing that we all use and we all love, and there's these ideas of FOMO, and, you know, I'm not in Cabo this weekend or whatever it is. But it's when other organizations start trying to use tech. And I saw this. ICE has invited tech companies to develop algorithms that will track visa holders' social media activities. Imagine if you're working at a place and they're like, we got this great RFP, it's from the government, and we're going to build this algorithm. I mean, that's terrible, because what is that stuff really leading to? And the news is just heartbreak. Immigration officials said Friday they will proceed with the deportation of an Ohio man who is the sole provider and trained medical caregiver of a 6-year-old paraplegic boy. That's crazy. And this is what's going on right now. And this world that we live in is rough. And you know, as an immigrant, a product of what's now being called chain migration, it's awful, and it starts at the top. And you know, this world will make you feel really anxious. The world and the country right now is really rough. It's rough for a lot of people. It's been rough for a long time, and it continues to spiral. And I often hear people say, well, you know, we're in California, it doesn't really affect us. And it doesn't really, you know, it doesn't really affect me. But the thing is, it does, because this is culture, this is roots into the fabric of our lives. And here's some like meta Twitter kind of thing where someone liked a tweet from someone that's quoting a poet who's quoting another poet. But Joseph Brodsky, who was a Russian poet teaching at Columbia, said, you Americans are so naive. You think evil is going to come into your houses wearing big black boots? It doesn't come like that. Look at the language. It begins in the language. And if you think about it, it does begin with the language. And this is sort of the starting point for everything. And it's overwhelming. And if you watch the news or you're reading social media, it can be disheartening and it can send you down a path of just spiraling anxiety. Because what can we do? We can't do everything, right? But we have to do something. And I saw this Cory Booker quote that said, "Do not let your inability to do everything undermine your determination to do something." And it's true. And several months back, my family was at a party at our friend Julie's house, and Julie works at the ACLU. And I was talking to her, and I said, "You know what? I want to do, I'm not doing enough. I need to be doing more. Please put me to work. I will do anything for you guys. Just give me some design work. I don't care what it is." And she said, "Okay, but I want to warn you, I'm going to take you up on it." And a couple days later, she sent me some stuff. And since then, I've been making a bunch of stuff for them. I made some folders, did some branding on a new campaign they have. I made stickers, email newsletters, just anything. And I feel good to be involved there. I feel like I'm contributing. I feel like I'm making a difference to an organization I'm already donating to. And I'm working for free. And I know in design we talk a lot about spec work and free work. I think this is the time to work for free, to spend our time instead of maybe writing that think piece on Medium about why we're pissed off about Dropbox's rebrand, to take that time and channel it into something that's a little bit better. So this really is the design project that you've been waiting for. So if you're a designer, a photographer, a writer, an artist, a marketer, a branding expert, if you do web development, software engineering, if you're a project manager, videographer, YouTube star, if you're in PR, if you're an influencer, congratulations. And if you're you're one of these people that has this amazing job, enviable, of being sent to Thailand, and you post these photos of thanks so much, Ritz-Carlton, for this fucking awesome fruit plate, and 400 of your 900,000 Instagram followers love it, and 6 of them end up going to Thailand and have the same fruit plate. Take that influence and put it towards something good. And don't worry about your personal brand, because that's bullshit. It's not time to worry about that stuff. It's time to really get involved. And the creative community talks a lot about side hustles, so this is it. There are lawyers out there that are repping people for free. You heard about this when the Muslim ban was coming. People were sitting at LAX repping people for free. Those people can use business cards. Those people can use letterhead. Get involved. Photographers, document what's going on around our cities and the towns. And you're all very talented. And the world and the country and people need your skills. If you're in branding, profiling someone that maybe can't afford to hire someone like you and get that message out there to a lot of people. There are amazing stories all over this country of people running for Congress who never really would be. There's the guy who was denied, he and his husband were denied the wedding license by this clerk, and now he's running for her position. There's stories like that all over this country. And I think it's really important to step up and be a part of this. Whatever you do in your day-to-day, there's a way to get involved. And I recently finished reading the Trevor Noah book, actually listening to it. You should listen to it. It's hilarious and amazing and heartbreaking. And he said, just because it isn't happening to you doesn't mean it isn't happening. And just because it isn't happening to you, it doesn't mean it isn't happening, because it is. It's happening out there. And I think it's time for the creative community, who's usually so good about being active and backing stuff on Kickstarter, doing all this, to really get involved and make a difference. Thank you.